And the guy said, we don't want to just do covers, why don't you write some songs? At a certain point, it's one of those mountaintop moments where you go, I get it, okay, leave me alone, I'll write. And so I started writing. Now when it came to Dexter, there's a left hand and there's a right hand. When it came to Dexter, which is when I'd finally been convinced I was supposed to be a writer, it was rejected at least twice by every publisher, and even some people who weren't publishers but just wanted to make sure nothing ever came of it. It went through 15 agents. The first one said, I can't possibly sell something about a psychopath, which frankly I agreed with. And the next to last one said, this is terrific. If you'll just make some small changes in the end. And I didn't want to. I thought they were wrong, but he convinced me he could sell it if I made a few changes in the end. So I did, and I sent the changes to him, and I waited 2 months and heard nothing. And I called, and the number had been disconnected. And I got a registered letter. To this day, I don't have an explanation. It said, for reasons I cannot go into now, I can no longer be an agent at this time. Good luck. So I gave up again, of course. But once again, the hand of God, or as I like to say, my wife. My wife comes to these things, by the way, in the first place, to make sure I don't do my Buddy Hackett impression. And in the second place, because she's convinced that everywhere I go, there are 15 or 20 Victoria's Secret models waiting to drag me away into the closet. But at this time, she sent out the word on, it was actually the Korean Mafia, which in publishing, there's a small subgroup of Korean American people. We don't know why, but they form a very tight clique. And she went through there. One of them was a good friend of hers, and arrived at the name of an agent who represented Olivia Goldsmith, Christopher Moore, Nelson DeMille, and I said, and I wasn't holding my breath on that one. But 3 weeks later, I got a letter from the guy that was so flattering, I was convinced my mother had written it to make me feel better. And he said, I'd be honored to represent this. And then I called and talked to him, and he said, but there's just a couple of things. It's up to you, but I would suggest 1 or 2 small changes. And I said, here we go again. And he said, the things he said to me were, he didn't know that I had changed it for the previous agent. He said, if you could do this, and it was basically undoing the changes and putting back what I did in the first place. So I went, this is my guy. And it was. It was 5 years of rejection and contempt and people spitting on me in the streets. And suddenly it was all reversed. I never believed, even for a second, that anyone would want to read even one book about this guy. He's a monster. But not only did people want to read that book, but my contract with the publisher specified that my next few books were going to be about this horrible monster. And then, you know, the Showtime series happened and things started taking off. And it occurred to me that I, at some point, formed a highly inflated picture of human nature, because people really like this guy, and that scares the hell out of me. And the other thing that scares the hell out of me is the people who binge watch or binge read it, and then go out on the streets behind the wheel of a car. But the TV show, it occurred to me the first time I was on the set, somebody came up to me and said, can I get you some coffee or water, Mr. Lindsay? And I had this moment like that. The last time I'd been on a set, I was saying, can I get you some coffee or water, Mr. Bernstein? And here I was suddenly Mr. And it was amazing. People want to know how much involvement I had in the series, a lot, other than prime questions. And although it varied from season to season, if I average it out over the whole course of the show, it's About 0. They did ask me the first season to consult. Now, I've had Hollywood experience. I should know what consult means. But for some reason, I spaced on it and thought it's different. And they called me asking. And they said, we think we found the guy to play Dexter. I said, great, who? I said, Michael C. Hall. And I said, who is that? I said, the guy from 6 Feet Under. And I thought about it, and I thought of Peter Strauss. And I said, I never saw Dexter as blonde, but I guess he could do it. Said, oh, no, not him. His brother on 6 Feet Under. And I said, the really short, dwarfish-looking, ugly guy? No, there's no way in hell he can play Dexter. Absolutely not. No, come up with someone else. And they said, well, we've already signed it. Thank you for consulting. So, my very first day on the set, I'm going, and I'm looking around for Michael C. Hall, the guy from 6 Feet Under, and I walked past Michael C. Hall, the guy playing Dexter, 6 or 7 times and didn't recognize him. Because no one tells you he's a shapeshifter, by the way. Seriously, if you look at, get a split screen on your TV and get YouTube, a clip of Dexter and a clip of David Fisher, is it, from 6 Feet Under, and it's 2 different actors. They don't look alike. The hairline is different, the eyes are a different color, the facial structure, everything. Totally different character. So I gave up finally, and I went to sit beside the director and watch on the monitor, and they were shooting the scene. And the very first words he said in character that I heard, I started to cry. And it's weirder when I tell you what the words were. Does that, anyone here remember the first season? The whole thing with the ice truck killer and all of that? Well, the first words Michael Hall said in my hearing in character were, refrigerated trucks. And I went, oh my God, that's him. And after that, I can't imagine anyone else ever playing the part. Of course, like everyone, at first I thought I wanted Johnny Depp, but that was before Tonto, by the way. So I can't imagine now anyone but Michael playing that part. He's a remarkable actor. The show on the whole has been pretty good to me. When they won the Peabody, they flew me up to be on the dais when they accepted the award. The highlight of that was one of the sponsors of the Peabody is Coca-Cola. So as you're sitting there for 4 hours, you drink a lot of free Coca-Cola. And as a result of that, you make frequent trips to the restroom. And at one point, I'm standing in the restroom, disposing properly of Coca-Cola. And someone else comes in, stands at the next urinal, I look over, and it's Stephen Colbert. And I said, my daughter is a huge fan of your show. And he said, in character, he said, how old is your daughter? I said, 19. And he goes, good, my demographic. So that was the real highlight of the trip. I'm giving you a warning now. In just a minute, I'm going to call for questions. Now, when I do that, that means you have to have thought of some questions. Because otherwise, it'll be a really long pause, and I may very well do my Buddy Hackett imitation. We don't want that. But before I do that, let's see, what have I left out anything really interesting? Let me get the bunny suit. Many careers. Yeah. I'm making notes here. I'm not off book yet for this. But as I said, over the years, people ask the same questions, and it's occurred to me that at some point it might make a good one-man show. So I'm trying to keep track of it and eventually do it. One I skipped over. This is the most frequently asked question. So, where did I get the idea for Dexter? How many of you were secretly going to ask Dexter? Talk about FAQ. When we were still living in Miami, we had some very good friends who were cops. And we were volunteering with a youth group with them. And they helped me out a lot, and they gave me the idea that if you're in law enforcement for longer than 15 minutes, it occurs to you that there's an enormous gap between law and justice. And you came into this to become a cop believing that they were the same thing. And probably your first day on the job, you learned they're not. So I think I was percolating on that for a while, wondering what can you do to close that gap. And then one day I was asked to speak at a businessman's luncheon. One of the, I think it was Kiwanis. And just give a short speech about why you must read one book before you die. And I was sitting at the head table and looking out into this room filled with people jumping to their feet with fake smiles and glad-handing and patting each other on the back and handing out cards, all horribly phony, and, oh, I'm so happy for you, and talking with food in their mouth. And I'm watching this, and it occurs to me that serial murder is not always a bad thing. And I remembered my cop friends, you know, justice here, law here, and the two kind of went into my head and came together. And I started taking notes on those little awful cocktail napkins. And I went home with a stack of napkins. That's where Dexter was born. Now, of course, that's part of the story, from napkin to book. Are there any people familiar with classical French tragedy here? Anybody? No, okay. I can never remember. It was either Corneille or Racine, but since nobody knows, it doesn't matter. One of them was in his study for 3 days and 3 nights without coming out for meals or anything. And his friends were gathered outside, looking at the closed doors, wondering when Corneille is going to come out, or Racine, as the case may be, because Corneille was on Racine's study. I don't know why. And waiting for 3 days and 3 nights, and finally the doors open, and Corneille comes out, or Racine, as the case may be. And he says, "It's finished!" He said it in French, you understand. "My new play is completely finished! Now I only have to write the words." Well, that's where I was with the stack of napkins. And it took a good 4 years, because back then I had to work for a living. And I was doing at least 4 jobs, including one of my favorites, because I've been collecting them lately for maybe publishing them as an ebook. I wrote a column for 5 years called Fatherhood. And at its peak, it was, I like to call it semi-syndicated. It was in 5 papers at its peak. And it was about me raising 2 little girls all by myself, because my wife was producing the evening news. And so she was never home during the day. So it was me and 2 little girls. And the columns were, one of them was from Wrinkles to the Nobel Prize using only a bra. And talking about when I was with my 11-year-old daughter in the middle of Walmart, when she suddenly announced, "Dad, I need one of those." And I look where she's pointing, and it's brasiers. And I have to buy her her first bra. And the columns went on with things like that about trying to cope as, you know, a man the size and shape of a refrigerator trying to raise 2 small girls who constantly outwit him. And I love that column. And as I say, I want to make an ebook of it. But at any rate, that was one of my 4 jobs at the time. And I bet this was going somewhere really good, wasn't it? Does anyone here know Paul Krasner? Founder and editor of The Realist? Yeah, Chicago, you remember the Chicago 7? Paul Krasner was number 8. And because of who he is, he was called to testify at that trial. And he decided it was a momentous event, and he should probably enhance the experience. So he took a massive hit of LSD before going into court. That ball pressed. I produced his stand-up show for a while in Los Angeles, and I got to know him. And he did something that I always mean to do and forget. He had a tangent spotter. And he would say, someone in the front row, do you have a good memory, sir? And they go, okay, you're my tangent spotter. And what that means is like what I just did. I went so far away from what I was saying, I can't remember. Now I can go, tangent spotter, what was I saying? So I'll do that next time, I promise. Wow, that's been almost half an hour. I was only supposed to talk 20 minutes. Can we get half an hour's worth of questions, or should I do Buddy Hackett? Can we do questions? Are we ready for that? Is there anyone in an official position of authority that can confirm or denounce? Okay, good. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, why do you want to write a character that scares you?
I say it again, please.
Why do you want to write a character that scares you?
Why do I want to write a character that scares me?
Yes.
Well, psychologically, I would have to say, because by putting the fear on paper, I can control and channel it. And on a more mundane level, because they were paying me really well to do it. So you get two answers. That's pretty good. Yes, ma'am.
I have to confess, I've never read any of your novels.
Okay, confessions are later. This is only questions. But I forgive you anyway. Thank you so much. You know, I know lots of people with kinky blonde hair too, so just don't get full of yourself. What is the appeal of the genre? In the first place, I have to say I never knew it was a genre. I certainly don't read these books. If I wasn't writing Dexter, I wouldn't read them. But one of the early reviews in the New York Times said, Jeff Lindsay revitalizes the genre. And my first thought was, holy Christ, there's a genre? What's wrong with people? And I still believe that. I don't understand it. I really don't. Yeah, I mean, I can get all intellectual on you and everything and it goes back to what is a story about. One of the main things that a story is about, when it's not like a Buddy Hackett impression, is, if you take it all the way back, here's where I saw the big cave bear, okay? It scared the hell out of me. I barely lived. Stay away from big cave bear. He's over there. And you can draw a direct line to that, from that to Dexter, to me. And if I need to do more intermediate stops, I'll offer a seminar online later. But does that answer your question at all? Probably not. Okay. Well, that's what you get for insulting me. Are there any other questions? No, but oh, yes.
Hi, not that you wouldn't want to, maybe you would. Do you think you could commit the perfect murder now?
I'm sorry. Back to people are stupid for a minute. Did you see what I just did when I couldn't hear her? Because I talk in the microphone to make my voice louder. When I couldn't hear her, I put my ear to her. Is it turned on?
Is it?
Yeah, yes.
Maybe you wouldn't want to, but do you think you could commit the perfect murder now?
I don't know. I lack that particular missing piece that would allow me to kill someone. I mean, if I had to plan one, I don't know. I could do a good job of it. Perfect? I don't think there's any such thing. I also think that unless you're a sociopath, the act of killing someone tends to ruin or at least deface your life. We're not really supposed to do that. I say this because my father is a combat-injured World War II veteran. In fact, he spent 3 years in Naval Hospital after the war being rebuilt. That's how injured. And every night of his life, he wakes up screaming. It's not because he was scared. It's because of the people he had to kill. And he can't watch footage of a flamethrower, so I'm guessing that was part of it. So I don't think people are supposed to do that. I'm pretty sure I couldn't. I mean, if it's someone breaking into my house and endangering my kids, in a way that would be the perfect murder, because I can stand my ground in my own house, and I will. But it's not something I want to do except as an intellectual exercise. And I don't think I could get away with it either, honestly. You always forget one thing. You need to try it 5 or 6 times and get better at it. Another question? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I wanted to mention that you were here a while back, and I did see you talk, and I did get a book autographed by you.
Did you hear the same stories then?
No, you were different. But what I wanted to say was, you said you have 2 daughters, and at that particular time when you came here, you brought one of your daughters. She was probably about 8 or 9, and I just wanted to give a personal thing. Looks like you've lost weight since then, and you look much better.
Not what I think.
I didn't, when I first saw you, I said, he's trimmed, he's slimmed down and he's trimmed.
I have, and there's more to come, but I don't know if this was your question, and in a sense it doesn't matter because my microphone is louder, but...
My question is, have you decided to be more healthier and whatnot?
More which?
Healthier eating?
I've always been healthy. I had a very brief window. Dexter became a success at almost the exact moment where my legs were ruined. And my whole life, I've run 3 days a week. My routine was ride my bicycle 5 miles to the park, run 3 miles, and ride the bicycle home. And when Dexter became a success and I couldn't run anymore, I didn't know what to do about exercising, because running was really my thing. I still dream about it. And on the other hand, there's a funny thing about overnight success when it takes 25 years. And I went through a very unhealthy period where I was not merely not exercising, but I was drinking too much. And I'm not going to get confessional, because, you know, I still had 3 glasses of wine last night at the party. But it adds up. And those 2 things together put me in a tailspin for a few years, quite honestly. And I just come out of it a few years ago and started rebuilding. And, you know, thank God everyone forgives me.
You look great. You look wonderful.
Well, thank you. I don't feel like it, but I can recommend an optometrist.
But I just wondered.
Any other questions? Over here. Yes, ma'am. The question is, do I still play with the band at all? I have not for quite some time. I have an open invitation to come back anytime I want. Every now and then I'll drop in and sing a couple of songs. And I miss it. But my schedule was that I was getting up at 3 a.m. to work, because that's when it worked best for me. And when you're with the band, you get home at 3:30. So it wasn't working for me. I decided, well, let's see, $200 a week with the band versus what I'm making for Dexter. It wasn't much of a choice. I mean, I love it. Music is still really important to me, always has been, but I'm not doing it much right now. Yes, sir?
How does the new book fit in with the series? Does it at all?
Yes, it's the final book in the series.
I meant with the TV series.
Oh, with the TV series? No, not at all.
It doesn't?
No. Is this the place for me to talk about the last episode of the TV series, or just a forward, like you're saying?
Well, I don't know. I see.
First of all, I didn't see the final episode, but I had nothing to do with the final episode, but I got hate mail from all over the world about the final episode. So it was just a little bit more encouragement to write my own final episode. Yeah, he's not a Wolverine ending where he goes to Canada and becomes a lumberjack, I promise. Yes, over here. Good question. My wife and my agent have not decided yet. They promised to let me know. Back there, yes.
Based on what you write about, and given the world we live in, Pessimistic or optimistic?
Personally, you mean? And what clan are you, sir? I say that because we go to the Highland Games every year, and my children carry the banner for Clan Lindsay.
You obviously tossed the cable.
I have and I won. Damn it. As long as you're not Clan Donald, I can talk to you. As a person, I start at extreme pessimism and go much, much further into the dark. That's where I live. And I would almost certainly be dead from sheer self-loathing if it weren't for my wife, who is Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. I have a cartoon on the door to my office because it reminds me of my wife, and it's captioned, "The Incurable Optimist." And it shows a man holding up a glass with this much water in it and going, "Wow, it's 1/32 full!" And that's my wife. I'm the guy who gets a full glass of water and goes, "Shit, it's probably poison." Did that answer your question? Yes, over here.
Was Dexter your very first book?
No, it was not. And thank you for bringing this up. It's another opportunity for a shameless plug. I had an earlier series, Tropical Depression was my first book, and I wrote the sequel to it, and it was never published because the editor, Donald Fine, who's very famous, he's the guy that made Cherokee John and John D. McDonald famous and a bunch of other people, and he said, "You're going to be the next one." And so the first book came out and it got nice reviews, and then I sent him the second book and heard nothing, and I called and I said, "Oh, well, he died." And it doesn't speak well of me, but my first thought was, that bastard. And then I have a couple of books that I co-wrote with my wife, including Dreamland and Dream Child, which are sci-fi books, and Hunting with Hemingway, which is really a lovely book. It's a series of tall tales. Here's my favorite thing about this book. The tall tales were originally written by Hillary's mother and father. And she found them in our closet under the stairs, which we call Grandpa's room, because a lot of her father's stuff is there. And thought, these are very good, they shouldn't just die. So she put together a new framework for it, which we wrote together. So the book finished is her mother and father, and then the second generation husband and wife writing team. So I've always loved that about it. But the reason it's a shameless plug is they are all about to be republished as ebooks. So please keep an eye open for these things. Hopefully there's going to be a certain amount of publicity about them, but I really like some of these old books. I'm glad they're coming back into the light again. Yes, sir?
When you were writing Dexter through the day, was it with you all the time? I mean, could you close down and then you got the rest of this time to forget about that? Or was it kind of a mindset where you're always thinking about it?
Did everybody hear the question? Okay. When I was writing it, did it stay with me all the time, or could I close it down? I could close it down. I couldn't have lived with it otherwise. I liken it to, I had some training to be a comic actor. I was at the ABC and then later the Paramount Young Talent Development. That was a while ago. And they were training us to be the crazy neighbor on the sitcom. And that's kind of what this was like, because I was able to go put my hours in writing Dexter and then take off the funny costume and hang it on the peg in the dressing room and go outside and go on with life. You know, I coached the kids soccer for many years and just do normal things that normal people, if there is such a thing, do. Really, the only time it became a problem was when I was researching Dexter is Delicious, which is about cannibalism. I don't recommend looking for them, but there are online chat rooms for cannibals. And in the course of my research, I found that 1 out of 3 about serious postings on these things are from people begging to be eaten. And the one that almost killed me was from a 16-year-old girl. And she said, when I was 6 years old, I went hunting with my dad and my brothers. And they killed a deer, and as I watched them slit it open and pull the entrails out, I thought, that's what I want. I'm really attractive and intelligent and a good person. I hope someone will consider eating me. I closed the office for a couple of days, and even though it was like 7 in the morning, I went out and had a stiff drink. And it was a while before I could think about that again. So, but for the most part, I can turn it off. Something else? Yes?
Do you have a favorite season for the TV show Dexter?
Do I have a what?
A favorite season.
Favorite season? Well, either the first season, because it was so close to the book, or the John Lithgow season of the Trinity Killer. And I have to say, if you saw the script for the Trinity Killer, from start to finish, it is so dumb. I would have thought, how can they even possibly approach this? It's ridiculous. It's hackneyed, it's cliched, it's stupid. I mean, oh, the Trinity Killer, la la la, Trinity, Trinity. It's stupid, right? And then Lithgow comes on screen, and it was maybe the best season, if not one of the best seasons of any show that year. So that just goes to show that, you know, sometimes brilliant talent is all it takes for something to be good. Who knew? Anything else? Yes. Do I ever go back and read what I've written and say, that came out of me? Did I do the face right? I reread it often enough because I record my own audiobooks now. This is against the rules, even though I used to do a lot of voiceover work. I did automatic dialogue replacement for Japanese and Korean cartoons. I dubbed in action movies from the Philippines, stuff like that. So I'm good with voice acting, but they didn't want me to because the rule in publishing is non-fiction writers can read their own works, but fiction writers can't. And I kept saying, well, I really can. I can send you a sample. No, it isn't done. Well, finally, the guy who did the first couple of books gave an interview to a magazine in which he said, I just finished recording. It's not easy being a professional audio recorder. I just finished doing a book that was maybe the dumbest thing I've ever read. It was this Dexter something. So I sent it to the publisher and said, now can I do my own books? And they said, yes. So I've re-recorded all of them, and I reread them. And it's funny because when it's done, I put it so far out of my head that it's like reading somebody else's sometimes. And I go, wow, that's good. I mean, oh. Did that answer the question? Yes? Oh, okay. Okay.
What would you like to write next?
A 7